engagements question, and then I will call Andrea Jenkins to ask her supplementary. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know the thoughts of members across the House are with the people of India. We're supporting India with vital medical equipment, and we will continue to work closely with the Indian authorities to determine what further help they may need. Mr. Speaker, I also welcome last week's Court of Appeal decision to overturn the convictions of 39 former sub-postmasters in the Horizon dispute, an appalling injustice. Sir Wyn Williams is leading an ongoing independent inquiry that will report this summer. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Let's go to Andrea Jenkins. Andrea. You're on mute, I think, Andrea. Have you got the answer? Tell us more about PMQs. I'm sure the Prime Minister knows the answer. Prime Minister. You can't do it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try and come back. I'm going to go to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his remarks about the humanitarian disaster we're witnessing in India? I know the UK has already committed some support, but given the scale and gravity of the disaster, I hope the Foreign Secretary will set out today what more the UK will do to help the Indian people in their hour of need. Can I also join the Prime Minister in his remarks about the Post Office case and ongoing injustice? And of course, today is International Workers' Memorial Day. And this day, this year, after all the sacrifices our frontline workers have made during the pandemic, it's even more poignant than usual. I join in solidarity with all those mourning loved ones today. Mr. Speaker, it was reported this week, including in the Daily Mail, the BBC and ITV, backed up by numerous sources, that at the end of October, the Prime Minister said he would rather have, and I quote, bodies pile high than implement another lockdown. Can the Prime Minister tell the House categorically, yes or no, did he make those remarks or remarks to that effect?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, and I think the right honourable gentleman is a lawyer, I'm given to understand. I think that if he's going to repeat allegations like that, he should come to this House and substantiate those allegations and say where he heard them and who exactly is supposed to have said those. Who exactly is supposed to have said those things, Mr. Speaker? Because what I certainly can tell him, and he asked about the October decisions, they were very bitter, very difficult decisions, as they would be for any Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, because no one wants to put this country into a lockdown with all the consequences that means for loss of education, for the damage to people's life chances, to the huge medical backlog that it entails. But it was thanks to that lockdown, the tough decision that we took, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the heroic efforts of the British people, that we have got through to this stage in the pandemic where we find ourselves rolling out our vaccine, where we've done 50% of the population, 25% of the adult population have now had 2 doses, Mr. Speaker. And lockdowns are miserable. Lockdowns are appalling things to have to do, but I have to say that I believe that we had absolutely no choice.
Yes, sir.
Well, somebody here isn't telling the truth. The House will have heard the Prime Minister's answer, and I remind him the Ministerial Code says, and I quote, ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. I'll leave it there for now. Turning to another issue, there'll be further on this, believe you me, who initially, and Prime Minister, initially is the key word here, who initially paid for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat?
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to misleading Parliament, he may recollect that it was only a few weeks ago that he said that he didn't oppose this government, this country staying in the leaving the European Medicines Agency. The fact that he was then forced to retract and leaving the European Medicines Agency was absolutely invaluable for our vaccine rollout. And actually, it was just last week that he said that James Dyson. He said that James Dyson was a personal friend of mine. A fact that James Dyson was corrected in the newspaper this morning. As for the latest stuff that he's bringing up, he should know that I paid for Downing Street refurbishment personally, Mr. Speaker, and I contrast it. And any further declaration that I have to make, I will, if any, I will be advised upon by Lord Guide. But if he talks about housing costs, Mr. Speaker, then the people of this country can make their own decision in just 8 days' time, because on average, Labour councils charge you £93 more in Band D, the Conservative councils, and Liberal Democrat councils charge you £120 more. That, I think, is the issue. That, I think, is the issue upon which the British people would like him to focus.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, normally when people don't want to incriminate themselves, they go no comment. Let me ask this. Let's explore this a bit further, Prime Minister. Let's ask it a different way. Either, this is the initial invoice, Prime Minister, initial invoice, either the taxpayer paid the initial invoice, or it was the Conservative Party, or it was a private donor, or it was the Prime Minister. So I'm making it easy for the Prime Minister. It's now multiple choice. There are only 4 options. It should be easier than finding the chatty rat, Mr. Speaker. So I ask the Prime Minister again, who paid the initial invoice, Prime Minister, for the redecoration of the Prime Minister's flat, the initial invoice?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've given him the answer, and the answer is I have covered the costs, and I think most people will find it absolutely bizarre. And of course, there's an electoral commission investigating this, and I can tell him that I've conformed in full with the code of conduct, with ministerial code, and officials have been have been advising me throughout this whole thing. But I think people will think it absolutely bizarre that he is focusing on this issue. When what people want to know is what plans the Labour government might have to improve the life of people in this country. And let me tell you, if he talks about housing again, we're helping people on the house. I'd rather not spend taxpayers' money, by the way, like the last Labour government, who spent £500,000 of taxpayers' money on the Downing Street flat. I'd rather, yes, they did, tarting it up. I would much rather help people get on the property ladder, and it's this Conservative government that has built 244,000 homes in the last year, which is a record over 30 years. This is a government that gets on with delivering on the people's priorities while he continually raises, I think, issues that most people would find irrelevant to their concerns.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, he talks of priorities. What's he spending his time doing? This is a Prime Minister who, during the pandemic, was nipping out of meetings to choose wallpaper at £840 a roll. Just last week, he spent his time phoning journalists to moan about his old friend Dominic Cummings. And he's telling the civil service to find out who paid for the redecoration of his flat. The Cabinet Secretary has been asked to investigate who paid for the refurbishments in the flat. Why doesn't the Prime Minister just tell him? That would be the end of the investigation. Mr. Speaker, it's been widely reported that Lord Brownlow, who just happens to have been given a peerage by the Conservative Party, was asked to donate £58,000 to help repay for the cost of this refurbishment. Can the Prime Minister, if he's so keen to answer, confirm, did Lord Brownlow make that payment for that purpose?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've answered this question several times now, and the answer is that I have covered the costs. I have met the requirements that I've been obliged to meet in full. And when it comes to the taxpayer and the costs of Number 10 Downing Street, it was the previous Labour government. I think Tony Blair racked up a bill of £350,000. And I think what the people of this country want to see is minimising taxpayer expense. They want to see a government that's focused on their needs and delivering more homes for the people of this country and cutting council tax, which is what we're doing. And it's on that basis that I think people are going to judge our parties on May the 6th.
Keir Starmer.
Answer the question. That's what the public's scream at their televisions every PMQs, answer the question. The Prime Minister hasn't answered the question. He knows he hasn't answered the question. He never answers the question. The Prime Minister will be aware that he's required to declare any benefits that relate to his political activities, including loans or credit arrangements, within 28 days. 28 days, Prime Minister, yes. He will also know that any donation must be recorded in the register of the Minister's interests, and that under the law, any donation of over £500 to a political party must be registered and declared. So the rules are very clear. The Electoral Commission now think that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence or offences may have occurred. That's incredibly serious. Can the Prime Minister tell the House, does he believe that any rules or laws have been broken in relation to the refurbishment of the Prime Minister's flat?
Prime Minister.
No, I don't, Mr. Speaker. What I believe has been strained to breaking point is the credulity of the public. He has half an hour every week to put serious and sensible questions to me about the state of the pandemic, about the vaccine rollout, about what we're doing to support our NHS, about what we're doing to fight crime, about what we're doing to bounce back from this pandemic, about the economic recovery, about jobs for the people of this country. And he goes on and on, Mr. Speaker, about wallpaper when, as I've told him umpteen times now, I paid for it.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, can I remind the Prime Minister of the Nolan Principles, which are meant to govern the behaviour of those in public office? They're these: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. Instead, what do we get from this Prime Minister and this Conservative government? Dodgy contracts, jobs for their mates, and cash for access. And who's at the heart of it? The Prime Minister, Major Sleaze, sitting there. Mr. Speaker, meanwhile, he talks about priorities. Crime is going up. NHS waiting lists are at record levels, and millions of people are worried about their jobs, including Liberty Steel. Mr. Speaker, don't the British people deserve a Prime Minister they can trust and a government that isn't mired in sleaze, cronyism and scandal?
Mr. Speaker, last week he came to this chamber and he attacked me for talking to James Dyson about ventilators, where we're now sending ventilators to help the people of India. And the following day, Mr. Speaker, the Labour front bench said that any Prime Minister in my position would have done exactly the same thing. It wasn't only a few months ago that they were actually attacking Kate Bingham, saying she was a crony when she helped to set up the vaccine task force that delivered millions of vaccines for the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, is helping us to get out of the pandemic. This is a government that is getting on with delivering on the people's priorities. We're rolling out many more nurses, 10,000 more nurses in the NHS now than there were this time last year. 8,771 more police officers on our streets now than there were when I was elected, including tougher sentences, Mr. Speaker, for serious sexual and violent criminals, which he opposed, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on. And by the way, I forgot to mention it. Last night, our friends in the European Union voted to approve our Brexit deal, which he opposed, which enables us not just to take back control of our borders, Mr. Speaker, but to deliver free, which it does, which he fervently opposed, enabling us, amongst other things, to deal with such threats as the European Super League, Mr. Speaker. But it enables us to deliver free ports in places like Teesside, and above all, taking back control of our country has allowed us to deliver the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, as he well knows, Mr. Speaker, which would not have been possible if we'd stayed in the European Medicines Agency, which he voted for. Mr. Speaker, week after week, the people of this country can see the difference between a Labour Party that twists and turns with the wind, that thinks of nothing except playing political games, whereas this party gets on with delivering on the people's priorities, and I hope that people will vote Conservative on May the 6th.
Let's see if we can calm it down a little. Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is indeed a world leader in COVID-19 vaccination. May I thank the Prime Minister for the swift action he has taken to deliver this for our country. And will the Prime Minister join me in thanking the many local volunteers, such as Kirsty Griffith, who has been volunteering at the Marlow Vaccine Centre, and Guy Hullis and Paul Bass, who have been volunteering alongside the Denham Community Health. And thank you for the vaccine rollout in South Bucks.
My honourable friend should thank everybody involved, and it's been a fantastic national effort led by the NHS, led by overwhelmingly by GPs, but also by many others, by local council officers, officials, by the army, by many others, and of course huge numbers of volunteers in her constituency and elsewhere. And I thank Kirsty Griffiths, Guy Hollis and Paul Bass very much for everything they've done.
Let's go to the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford. Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition over the humanitarian crisis in India and the injustice over the Horizon issue at the Post Office. Mr. Speaker, over 127,000 people have died from COVID in the United Kingdom. People have lost their mothers and fathers, their grandparents and even their children. NHS staff have given their all, fighting to keep people alive. That's why so many people find the Prime Minister's remark that he would rather let their bodies pile high in their thousands than go into lockdown utterly sickening. The BBC and ITV have multiple sources confirming that this is what the Prime Minister said. People are willing to go under oath, Mr. Speaker, confirming that the Prime Minister said these exact words, under oath, Mr. Speaker. Now, parliamentary rules stop me from saying that the Prime Minister has repeatedly lied to the public over the last week. But can I ask the question, are you a liar, Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I leave it to you to judge whether the honourable gentleman's remarks were in order. But what I will say to him is that...
unfortunately, we're in normal joke, but we're not savoury and not what we would expect.
I'm grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. But what I would say to the right honourable gentleman is that if he is going to relay that kind of quotation, it is up to him in a place like Parliament to produce the author. The person who claims to have heard it, because I can't find them. He says that they're willing to go on oath. Perhaps they're sitting somewhere in this building. I rather doubt it, because I didn't say those words. What I do believe is that a lockdown is a miserable, miserable thing, and I did everything I could to try to protect the British public throughout the pandemic, to protect them from lockdowns, but also to protect them from disease. And he's right to draw attention to the wretched toll that COVID has brought. And we grieve, and I know the whole House grieves for every family that has lost a loved one. It has been a horrendous time, but it is thanks to that lockdown and the vaccine rollout, combined with the vaccine rollout, that we're making the progress we are. And I may say we're making progress across the whole of the United Kingdom.
Let's go back to Ian Blackford. Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, it's the Prime Minister's behaviour which is not in order. This is a Prime Minister who is up to his neck in a swamp of Tory sleaze. We've seen contracts for cronies, texts for tax breaks, and cash for curtains. The Prime Minister has dodged these questions all week, and he's dodged them again today. But these questions simply are not going to go away. So when exactly was money funneled through Tory HQ into his personal bank account? When did he pay back this money? Was it an interest-free loan? And who is the donor or donors who originally funded it? Is the Prime Minister aware that if he continues to fail to answer these questions, that the Electoral Commission has the powers to prosecute him? Will the Prime Minister publish these details today, or is he going to wait until the police come knocking at his door?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, I look forward to what the Electoral Commission has to say, but I can tell him that for the rest of it, he's talking complete nonsense. And the only thing I will say is that it is thanks to our investment in policing that we're going to have another 20,000 more officers on the streets of our country, and that is a fantastic thing. And we will be making sure that gets through to Scotland as well. What we want to see is a Scottish nationalist government stop obsessing about breaking up our country, which is all they can think about and talk about tackling crime and using that investment to fight crime, which is, I think, what the people of Scotland want to see.
Gary Samwell.
Speaker, if the Prime Minister was to walk down Bristol Road South in Longbridge today, he would see a small army of JCB diggers levelling out the old MG Rover Westworks site to provide one of the biggest levelling up projects locally, with 5,000 extra jobs at an industrial site. But what people want to see too is a regeneration of Northfield High Street with a proper plan and money on the table. And so does the Prime Minister agree with me that we need people like Andy Street's driven and energetic mayors delivering for the West Midlands, working with me and local Conservative councillors to deliver on this plan? Because after all, Mr. Speaker, teamwork makes the dream work.
Mr. Speaker, I'm lost in admiration for what Andy Street is doing. He's a fantastic mayor of the West Midlands. He's got a fantastic vision for transport, for jobs, for growth and recovery. And I hope everybody votes for Andy Street on May the 6th.
Right, let's just go to Liz Saville-Roberts. Liz.
Diolch yn fawr, Lefarydd. I think it's worth repeating the Ministerial Code's 7 guiding principles: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. The Prime Minister has spent the week ticking them off on his don't do list. At the same time, he tries to play down allegations of saying, let the bodies pile high. Given that the sole judge on questions relating to the conduct of ministers and the conduct of the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister himself, what happens when a Prime Minister goes rogue?
Mr. Speaker, the people of this country have a chance to make their own minds up on May the 6th. And when they look at what's happening in Wales, Mr. Speaker, they have a chance to make a choice between I'm afraid, a continually failing Welsh Labour government or Welsh Conservative administration in Cardiff that I believe has a fantastic vision. 65,000 high-skilled, high-paid jobs, doing up finally addressing the problems of the A55, getting 5,000 more teachers, 3,000 more nurses into the Welsh NHS, solving the problems of the M4, which I've spoken about so movingly many times in this chamber before, Mr. Speaker. I hope that people will avoid voting for Plaid Cymru and that they will vote for Welsh Conservatives on May the 6th in Wales.
Duncan Baker.
Mr. Speaker, as probably the only former sub-postmaster in Parliament, last Friday's ruling was the beginning, not the end. Yes, it will cost a lot of money, and yes, it would take time, and there is more compensation that is needed. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that only a proper judge-led public inquiry can really bring justice to those victims of this horrendous accounting scandal, and also hold to account those involved behind the scenes?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his expertise in this matter, and thank him for what he has just said, because he's totally right. I think that what happened to those post office workers, the postmasters, the sub-postmasters, was appalling. It was one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in our history, Mr. Speaker, and we are looking indeed at the issues involved, and the former High Court Judge Sir Wyn Williams will be making recommendations about what further actions, what further apologies we need to make.
Let's go to Howell Williams. Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The PM just raised the matter of the Welsh general election. Well, in March last year, this United Kingdom Conservative government intercepted a deal between Wales and the Roche Pharmaceutical Company for 5,000 daily COVID tests, instructing the company to reserve all additional COVID tests to England. Those tests would have been crucial to saving thousands of lives in Wales. So, as we go to the polls next week, will the Prime Minister tell us why Welsh lives meant so little to him?
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid the honourable gentleman is completely wrong in what he says about tests, but I can tell him that he's right about one thing, which is that Wales has made an amazing contribution to our UK fight back against COVID. And it was incredible to go to the Wockhardt factory in Wrexham, to go to that site. And it's Wockhardt working together with Oxford Biomedica that has enabled us to roll out the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, Mr. Speaker, that has made such a difference. And I want to say a massive thank you again to those Welsh scientists, all those people working in that factory, because they have helped to save countless lives across the UK.
Laura Forrest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The integrated review confirms the vital role the atomic weapons establishment in Berkshire will play in our future nuclear capability. I want to pay tribute to them, and particularly to the senior female employees who have won a slew of national awards for their work in defence, science, engineering and nuclear security. Given the government's significant investment in all these sectors, would my right honourable friend say how he plans to improve women's participation in these fields, where they've been historically underrepresented, and could I invite him to the AWE to illustrate our success?
Yes. I would be honoured to take up her invitation as soon as I can. In terms of the female representation in that sector, she should, of course, knows that Alison Atkinson became the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of AWE in May 2020, and there are huge numbers of opportunities for women to join our armed services, thanks, Mr. Speaker, above all, to the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
Let's go to Sarah Upton.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment last week to include aviation and shipping into our target emissions. But surely the Prime Minister knows that we will miss this target if we proceed with a third runway at Heathrow. And furthermore, that would undermine the progress that this government hopes to make towards net zero. So will the Prime Minister take this opportunity to commit to amending the airport's national policy statement in light of these commitments?
Mr. Speaker, the third runway at Heathrow is, as she knows, a private sector venture. It's up to them to produce the capital to do it. I don't see any immediate sign of that particular project coming off. I think what we should be looking at instead, and what we are looking at, is the prospect of jet zero aviation, Mr. Speaker, of flying without carbon emissions, or with far lower carbon emissions. And it is in that area that the Department of the BEIS and the DFT are working together with the manufacturers so that this country leads in guilt-free flying.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right now, in every part of the country, levels of business optimism are higher than they have been since the start of the pandemic, with many firms planning to hire more staff and create more apprenticeships for our young people. And there's one factor, more than anything else, that underpins that optimism, and that is the success of the UK vaccination programme. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that there's never been a more important moment for voters in Scotland and in Wales to reject the negativity and the divisiveness of the nationalists and instead look forward to a brighter and stronger future as one united kingdom?
Absolutely. I don't know why the shadow leaders, PPS, is shaking her head, because surely she would agree with that. We want to work together across the whole of the UK, and I pay tribute to, as I've just said, to the incredible work of the Watcart factory in Wales, but there's also the Valneva factory in Scotland, and the whole of the United Kingdom coming together, represented by our armed services and above all by our NHS, helping to deliver that vaccine rollout to protect the country and take it forward.
Let's go to Janet Davey. Janet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is absolutely shocking that we have heard the Electoral Commission is investigating funding of the Prime Minister's Downing Street flat, saying there are reasonable grounds to suspect an offence. Why does the Prime Minister think all of these stories about sleaze, corruption and dishonesty keep happening to him and his Conservative government?
I tell you what, Mr. Speaker, I think it's because people are absolutely determined to find anything they can hang on to talk about, except the vaccine rollout, except our plans to unite and level up across the country, except our plans to fight crime and give people the opportunity to buy their own homes, because they don't want to discuss those issues, because they can't win on those issues, Mr. Speaker, because they've got absolutely nothing to say. And that's what's become clear over the last year.
Let's go to Nick Fletcher. Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I ask my question, may I first ask the Prime Minister to join me in thanking all the staff at Doncaster Royal Infirmary and the emergency services for dealing swiftly with a major water leak yesterday. Fortunately, no one was hurt and all patients have been moved safely to other wards. However, back to my original question, The local elections are only days away and would therefore like to ask the Prime Minister if he would offer his full support to Doncaster Conservative mayoral candidate James Hart. James, like me, is a local businessman and will shout up for our town and work closely with me on delivering the government's levelling up agenda.
Minister.
Well, look, my honourable friend is absolutely right. First of all, hang on, he's right, Mr. Speaker, to want to thank all the staff of Doncaster Royal Infirmary for what they did for the emergency services in dealing with the incident last night. And I'm glad to take that opportunity. But I'm also glad to take the opportunity to support him in his campaign for James Hart. And I do hope that the people of Doncaster will go out to vote and support him on May the 6th.
Let's come to Christian Matheson.
Speaker, the Prime Minister promised in a series of texts to fix a tax issue for his mate, Sir James Dyson. At that dispatch box last week, he promised to publish those texts, but of course he's not made good on that promise. So when will he publish them?
Mr. Speaker, I promised to publish the account of my dealings with James Dyson, which is exactly what I have done. And I can't believe they don't learn their lesson, Mr. Speaker. They attacked the government for having any kind of discussions with a British ventilator maker last week, or potential ventilator maker last week, and then the following day they did a U-turn and said that any Prime Minister would do it, and they've now done a double U-turn, Mr. Speaker, and they're trying to bash me again. Which is it? Do you believe the government should be supporting British manufacturing delivering ventilators? Yes or no? That's the question for Labour.
Let's go to Dr. Luke Evans. Luke.
Mr. Speaker, my constituency is best for Battle of Bosworth, but we also have many other attractions like Twycross Zoo, Mallory Racecourse, Burbage Common and Thornton Reservoir. Now, these attractions all support superb cafes and pubs. With the bank holiday weekend coming up, does the Prime Minister have any plans? Does he want to pop up to Bosworth? But more importantly, what is the government doing to support these attractions and domestic tourism as we go into the summer?
I want to thank my honourable friend. I want to tell him that no matter how many pints I joined him in lifting in the pubs of Bosworth, it could not do as much for the economy of Bosworth as what we're already doing with the £56 million Welcome Back Fund, probably even more welcome than my presence in Bosworth. I venture to suggest that hotly contested perhaps, and that we've extended the cut in VAT for tourism and hospitality to 5% right the way through till the end of September.
Let's go to Lillian Greenwood. Lillian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Isn't the truth behind all of this, the sleaze, the scandals, the jobs for your mates, the cash for curtains, that the Prime Minister thinks that rules, laws and decency are for other people? The sort of people who shop at John Lewis or IKEA or Argos, who don't have wealthy donors to fund their lifestyle, not for people like him and his ministers.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think what people think is that the Labour Party are losing all the arguments across British politics. They've got nothing to say. They've got no plan for our future, no vision for our country. They see a Conservative government that is getting on with uniting and levelling up with the most ambitious agenda any government has had for generations. And I think that's what they're listening to.
Let's go to Ben Bradley. Ben.
Prime Minister, next week residents here in Nottinghamshire will go out to vote for the first time since that incredibly successful 2019 election, where they elected a full slate of Conservative MPs across every constituency in this county. Despite that success, many areas like Mansfield and much of the new Blue Wall across the Midlands and North will still have mainly Labour councillors at a local level. Does my right honourable friend have a message for Nottinghamshire voters who have the opportunity next week to elect a Conservative local team that can work with our MPs to deliver for Nottinghamshire?
I do, and I want to thank him for all the wonderful work that he does for his constituency. My message would be, yes, I hope that people of Nottinghamshire will get out and vote Conservative, because it's we who share your priorities on crime, on the NHS, on investment in infrastructure, and on levelling up across our country. So I hope you'll vote Conservative on May the 6th.
Right, let us go to Rachel Hopkins. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When was the Prime Minister and his Chief of Staff first made aware of the plan for a European Super League?
I first was made aware of the plans for a European Super League on, I think, the Sunday night, and we acted decisively, using the arsenal of legislative freedoms that we now have, thanks to leaving the European Union, which he opposed, of course. But we acted decisively to make clear that the UK government took a dim view of this matter, Mr. Speaker, and the same goes for my Chief of Staff.
Siobhan Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituency of Stroud recently won the Best Place to Live, and there is much to visit there, including a historic lamp standard that was erected to celebrate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. And next year, our own Queen will mark her succession to the throne of 70 years. And I would ask the Prime Minister, will he join me in supporting the gift being proposed by Parliament to mark Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee?
I want to thank my honourable friend for a wonderful proposal, and I would certainly encourage all colleagues to support and to contribute to her project.
We're now going to go back to Andrea Jenkins. Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week, we will elect our first mayor of West Yorkshire. Now, does the Prime Minister agree with me that for far too long, Labour have taken our northern heartlands for granted? On Thursday, the 6th of May, we'll have the opportunity to elect patriotic, hard-working northerners like Matt Robinson, Ben Houchin and Jill Mortimer in Hartlepool. They will be strong voices and champions for infrastructure and housing and jobs. We must seize this chance to build back better after the pandemic, and that only the Conservatives will deliver on this.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they don't like that sort of thing, do they? They don't like focusing. They don't like focusing on the issues that actually matter to the British people and the people of West Yorkshire. I thank my honourable friend. She's absolutely right. I hope they will go. The people on May the 6th will get out and vote for a party that believes in supporting our NHS, that believes in fighting crime, not being soft on crime, and that will bring jobs and regeneration across the entire country. And I hope that they will vote Conservative on May the 6th.
Order. I'm now suspending the House for 3 minutes to enable the necessary arrangements for the next business.